Welcome back to Drunk on Writing, brought to you in part through the patronage of Ariya Norinth. In this episode, we're taking a look at the latest, greatest graphic novel from comic book writer and artist Jeff Lemire, FROGCATCHER, published by Gallery 13 and available September 24th. Before we get started, let me just give a friendly reminder that if you enjoy this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Please give the video a thumbs up, and if you're feeling rather nice, head on over to drunkonwriting.com and sign up for a bevy of exclusives and so much more. I'll leave it at that. Now, full disclosure here, I was provided an advanced copy of this graphic novel by Jeff Lemire. Pretty cool. So take my review here with a grain of salt, as it were. That said, I really enjoyed this graphic novel. It reminds me so much of the introspective kind of takes, the introspective narratives that I've come to expect from Jeff Lemire's novels, especially after reading the likes of Underwater Welder, Trillium, and, most recently, Royal City. Yes, that means if you've read those books, those graphic novels, those series, you know pretty much what you're going to get into here. This thoughtful, evocative exploration. An exploration here of memory, life, death, and identity. The art is exceptional. Though, again, if you are a Lemire fan, mostly what you'd expect in terms of generally sort of scratchy and simple painting-like panels. Except the use of color in here is exquisite, to say the least. I don't really know how to describe it without going on into spoilers. And there's a certain 8-page sequence toward the start of the book that is mystifying. It's a panelization of a film effect, and it's just truly a sight to behold. And it's something that is repeated a little later on in the book in a much shorter, more condensed way. And while I love it, and I love both instances of it, that first transition is 8 pages. 8 whole pages, 8 full pages out of 103 pages total for this graphic novel. Now, that's a good chunk of the book, right? Dedicated to what is, in effect, a dissolve, a transition. And to kind of top that, a good, probably about a quarter of the book is absolutely silent. There's no dialogue. So you can sort of breeze through the book. I think the first time I read it for this review, I read it in about half an hour. The second time, I read it more slowly. I really dug into the art, and but you can fly right through this. But don't get me wrong here. Like I said, I read this book twice, and I'm still really considering, really reeling or really digesting the narrative impact here. The way it explores the passivity of mortality. It's really unlike anything I've read before, at least in recent memory, anything that I can recall. But there is something of an egregious error within the narrative that unfortunately is really keeping me from outright recommending this book to anyone, at least at the beginning. Now, maybe this is something that will be addressed in the print version. Maybe it will be fixed in a later printing. But, I'm not going to spoil here. I'll kind of dance around it. A piece of information is presented to readers that seems relatively unimportant, but later goes on to become the crux of the story, the crux of the narrative. Except for the fact that the crux is wrong. It refers to something that simply isn't there, simply is missing, is incorrect. Now, I try to give this the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe that was part of the narrative. This is, as I said, it's something of an exploration of memory, so maybe that change, that shift in the information had something to do with that. So I read it through the second time. The narrative does not support that interpretation as far as I can tell. There's no sort of, oh, this shifted. This is not quite how I remember it earlier. It's changed. There's nothing like that. It's just presented as this is wrong. And reading back, there's a lot of foreshadowing, which was great. A lot of foreshadowing in the ending, a lot of stuff that you don't pick up on in that first reading. But this particular piece of information is it's an error. It is an error. And I actually reached out to Jeff Lemire and I mentioned it to him. I asked, am I reading this wrong? Or is this a mistake? Because plenty of other people have read this. Most recently I saw a review from Warren Ellis who's read it. And nobody seems to be mentioning this. I seem to be the first one that I've read where this is mentioned. And that seems to me to be an issue. Maybe people aren't reading it well enough, closely enough. Maybe, editorial simply glossed over this fact, which is unfortunate. That's an editor's job. I don't know. Regardless of if that was an intentional mistake or not, if I work around that, the book is fantastic. It literally made me cry. It is touching. It is endearing. It is so thoughtful. It's just a beautifully made book that is unfortunately aired. It's got a nasty little error in it, and I really hope that it gets fixed or explained or somehow otherwise remedied, because I think everybody should read this. But in its current state, I don't think I can recommend it. Would I give it a blanket recommendation? No. If you like Lemire, yes, I think so. Although maybe wait for a later printing. This has been the Drunk on Writing Reacts to Jeff Lemire's FROGCATCHERS. Available September 24th, which, as I'm recording this, is in just a few days. Give it a look. Maybe you like it. Maybe you can come back and say what an idiot I am and that I didn't understand it or I misinterpreted it. Please let me know. I would love to hear your feedback on how big of an idiot and moron I am. But until you do that, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Please give this video a thumbs up. Please head on over to drunkonwriting.com. And until next time, cheers and keep on writing.